Hello, everyone. Welcome to NH Studio 30 Live, where we provide perspective and thought leadership on a critical topic facing the industry as a whole. I'm John Dioso, editor of Studio 30, and today we're going to discuss how the right data can build brand value and protect consumer privacy. A sea change in measurement is underway as the industry begins to move beyond its long-time reliance on third-party data to target consumers. But it's not bad news for everyone. Max, could you bring up that story? Investors looking for an inside edge to Google's federated learning of cohorts have kicked off an acquisition frenzy of partners of the Google management platform with competing bids up to 20 times the company's EBITDA. What's really the best long-term option for companies and their clients? We'll find out. Today, I'm joined by Piano Chief Growth Officer Joanna Catalano, Piano Managing Director Global Accounts Marie Fenner, and ID5 co-founder and CEO Mathieu Roche to discuss top strategies as advertisers prepare for the cookieless future. Welcome, everybody.
Thanks, John. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So great to have you. Before we get started, I want to let everybody out in the audience please write in and let us know where you're watching us from. All right, let's get started. All right. There seems to be a huge unknown in terms of the efficacy of measurement and attribution once the industry crosses over to a cookieless reality. Could you each weigh in with your perspective on this and where you think these changes are headed? Let's start with Joanna.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John. I'm looking in my magic crystal ball here to give you these answers. Now, I mean, look, I think there are a few areas that we need to keep an eye on, right? I think the first is where we have always looked to campaign reporting, and everyone's running statistics around viewability, reach, click-through rate, and how this performs on a segment level. And I think as cookies are deprecated, we expect to see kind of a decrease in total impressions, but we do expect an increase in click-through rate, since the data that we're going to be using for targeting impressions will be much more reliable. So we're keeping an eye on that through campaign reporting. We're also looking at match rate to be able to understand how valuable the kind of unified ID performs. That's really important. And when we talk about match rate, we're looking at how many of the IDs that we recognize are also recognized by brands. So that's really another thing that we're focused on, is how we'll observe the match rate pre and post. Right now, we're kind of the third-party cookie is still there, so we can do a bit of testing and to really be able to see how the unified ID compares to the third-party cookie. And the last one is, I think really important, is around revenue attribution reporting. This is much less established than the other two, and so we're really focused on how we can provide reporting to our publishers and also internally to our teams about the revenue that gets generated from ads. And being able to attribute that revenue to page views, users, segments, content types, etc. So this is another one that we're really intrigued by and feel is promising.
You mentioned publishers. Marie, do you want to weigh in on your perspective from that and on your side of Piano?
Absolutely. I think the cookieless world is not really the apocalypse. There are many things that we can do from the publisher side. So, for example, even just anonymous data, even before you get the permission to track with the anonymous data, there's so much you can do. There are even publishers who are not even getting that anonymous data. So we heard about horror stories of people losing 40% of the visibility of their reader base, etc. So there are ways to achieve that. There are vendors who can provide that. So having that sort of global volume on an anonymous basis, that's at least the first starting point. After that, permission. So consent is very important. Once you have that permission, you can start the permission marketing, and there are still limitations. Permission doesn't mean that you can track that person as a one known person, which means although we can do attribution, cross-platform, cross-device becomes a little bit more difficult. And then from there, we look at the holy grail of the holy grail, which is the authenticated data. Once you have the permission to and authentication from the users, then we can really start looking at cross-device, cross-platform, and attribution over a lifetime value of that particular user as well. So there are many different ways that we can look into.
Mathieu, from the ID5 identity perspective, what is your take on this? What are you seeing?
Well, it's really important to understand that identification is really the foundation of a lot of the things that make digital advertising valuable for brands. And we're talking about publishers a lot, and understandably, because it's a critical time for them. But whatever publishers do, it needs to work for brands, because it's a marketplace, right? You need demand and supply to come together. And brands are really looking at identification to be able to obviously understand their customers and target their customers, but also to be able to optimize their campaigns. Frequency campaigning is a huge use case for identification, and also to be able to measure performance, right? And all of those use cases have been powered by cookies and mobile ad IDs, and those are the enablers that are going away. And so the real challenge of this kind of new world that we're going into is to reinvent this infrastructure in a way that is obviously privacy compliant, because, like Mary said, this is the new normal, right? We have to enter into a relationship with consumers that is consented, that is transparent, and that is non-negotiable, right? So that's the first one. But we also need to enable those use cases. We need to enable the data companies like Piano to be able to collect data, because that's what brands and publishers need to be able to do. And so it's really a question of reinventing the infrastructure that supports what makes the advertising the business model of the open web. So it is a big transition, but it can be a transition into a better, more privacy compliant, more data protective world if we look at it with the right lens.
Before we go on to that, building that new infrastructure, can you just address? I know that identity, and you've mentioned before that identity and data have been conflated in the past. Can you just explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, we use a lot the analogy of a currency and an asset, right? Identity is the currency that enables trading of assets, right? Brands have assets. They have customer knowledge. They have transactions that they want to measure, right? That's the intelligence. To be able to access that intelligence, they need a way to connect information to an individual, right? And that's the currency. And that connection has to be available across the board, because you want to connect to an individual when they're on your site, when they're on your partner's site. You have to have that currency available at a greater scale. And historically, we're talking about a 12 months kind of a market here, but generally speaking, a lot of the people who have invested into cookieless identification also happen to have a data-based business model. And so they've conflated those two topics and saying, well, the future is first-party data, or the future is, authenticated users, because their business model is tied to those topics, right? In reality, you have first-party data, but you can have third-party data attached to a universal ID, like what we do at ID5. You have authentication capability that can power, but it's not the core. The core is having a currency, having something that enables transactions, that enables global recognition across domains of a user, so that you can build assets. You can collect information, you can understand who they are, and you can engage with them, measure the performance of that engagement, with this kind of global currency that really is here to power those transactions. So it's really important to make a difference. What we need is a global currency to power digital advertising. That's what identity is, right? The value attached to identity, the intelligence, the customer knowledge, all of that is the asset that will be enabled, or that for which transaction will be enabled by the currency. So it's really about a currency. That's what we're talking about.
All right. So now that we've distinguished between the differences between identity and data, speaking of first-party data, what is the next step for publishers who have that first-party data to maximize the ROI and the data that they do have? Mathieu, do you want to take that first, or Joanna or Marie? Anyone, please jump in.
Marie, you have some good examples. I also have some I can share. You want to go first, Marie?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, with the permission data, I think there's a lot we can do. You can create really detailed segments to have a really zeroed in personalization. But once you have the authenticated data, so ID and logins and whatnot, you can then start, in a way, orchestrating that customer journey. Not only do we have that authenticated data to improve and do smarter advertising, we can start nudging those authenticated users to, why not subscribe? Why not donate for our good cause and quality journalism as well as a membership like a Guardian, very good example. But also with data, I think there's an amplification that we can do. So many of our publisher clients are doing a lot of product diversification. So they may start with advertising and go into subscription, but there are many in between as well. For example, many publishers are even venturing into e-commerce. So they have a shop like a Telegraph. If you go to Telegraph, if you create that brand loyalty and you want to, as a reader, associate yourself with that brand, why not buy a gardening equipment from Telegraph? But also there are affiliate marketing, which is very successful, revenue generation for many publishers. If you look at, for example, Stylist magazine, which is based here in the UK, they have different sections like a Strong Women. I'm very familiar with that one. And when you go into Strong Women, I'm happy to give my email address. I'm happy to receive personalized messages, etc. And when I do that, I'm happy to go and click through and buy Lululemon running gear, for example. So by doing so, you're actually leveraging the data you are collecting to hyper personalize, but also at the same time, you're actually garnering even more data from there as well. So there's a much bigger revenue generations that you can do, not just relying on advertising, but many product diversification as well.
I think it's a very good point, if I may, to kind of look at this as it is a product strategy, right? And publishers have to fundamentally reinvent or rethink about their product strategy with different levels of engagement. Not all publishers will be able to, get the subscription rate that the New York Times is able to get. Not all publishers will be able to get, people to subscribe or become members or whatever. So I think it would be a mistake to think that the only way forward is to get people to log in. We don't want a logged in internet. What made Google and Facebook successful for the past 10 years cannot be necessarily replicated by everybody who provides recipes or weather forecasts online, and it shouldn't be. And that shouldn't be the only way forward. If you can offer subscription, if you can offer membership options, if you can offer newsletters, if you can offer e-commerce, you can offer affiliation, you should. As a publisher, it's important to build that relationship with your customers. But we should, from an identity standpoint, at least from an infrastructure standpoint, we should build something that works for all publishers, whatever the level of engagement with our customers. And that's where having a very open-minded approach to this definition of a currency is really important, because we want advertising to continue to support publishers who can command authenticated experiences, but also for those who cannot.
Maybe the next conversation will be tearing down the walled gardens by Mathieu Roche. I sense a theme happening here.
Don't get me started.
Joanna, did you want to weigh in?
I wanted to quickly just weigh in. I agree on that product innovation. I think that's also, again, a real opportunity. And Marie and Mathieu both gave examples. And I think, hold your ears, Mathieu, but we have, a client in this South China, Star. This is a publisher that didn't have to join up with an ID solution because they developed their own first-party solution. Sorry, Mathieu. But, I think also, another big, obviously because of GDPR, Europe has sort of been a bit ahead of the curve on this. And, we also work with a very large publisher called Media House. And they run over 40 of the largest news, classifieds, career websites in both Belgium and the Netherlands. And speaking of walled gardens, they wanted to create an advertising experience that could match the same level of Google and Facebook's granularity, while providing service flexibility that we know the Googles and Facebooks of the world never do. So that they realized that they were a bit challenged in terms of data literacy, also in terms of siloed data, right? We see this, but they kind of took it head on, and they were able to have a very successful program, in terms of the building outstanding campaigns, drawing advertisers, raising revenues, kind of creating that match. Some stats are like 25% click-through rate on retargeted native advertising articles, 60% of native advertising readers converted on the advertiser site. and a 26% higher click-through rate in comparable non-targeted campaigns. And it's insane results. So again, I think, just being willing to take a bit of risk and think about how you can, build something that is unique to you, differentiated, and from a product innovation perspective is a really good way to move forward.
Is there anything that you, or Joanna, this isn't, anybody else could weigh in on this, that you think that publishers are not taking advantage of in these early stages? Joanna, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, so I think to kind of continue on this, I think there has been a bit of, shock, and then we need to get our ducks in a row. What does that mean? And I think we're not seeing as many as I would like. Publishers and even outside of publishing, like, how can we make this a competitive advantage? How can we be a bit more bullish, right? For the publishers, this is the moment to say, this is the value that we can bring to the brands. And so I think being more proactive, more direct, clearer, strategic about the values that they can provide, I think that, that's something that let's do more of.
All right. Go ahead, Matthew.
I couldn't agree more. I think as much as it can seem a challenge, I think it's a huge opportunity for publishers. Publishers have suffered from third-party cookies because third-party cookies enable basically everybody, anytime, anywhere, to have access to your audience and your data, right? And data leakage has been a huge problem, and it's 100% related to the availability of identity enabled by third-party cookies. Without third-party cookies, you can really close down the doors to your inventory and only open it up to the people that you want to give access to that intelligence, you want to share that intelligence with. But for this transition to be successful, publishers need to lean in. They need to say, to vote with their kind of support, to say, I want this because this works better for me than what was happening in the past, or what other people are trying to do that isn't going to be in my best interest. So I think it's the time right now for publishers to really understand what the options are, understand what the benefits are of solutions like Universal ID, which really enables them to protect their inventory, to protect their data, to protect their customers, but still to monetize it if they want to with whoever they want to. So really understand the pros and cons of the different kind of future identification solutions, and to lean in, because it's a marketplace. The marketplace will be built by adoption on the buy side and the sell side. Standing on the sidelines isn't going to help the market move in the direction that works for you. And there is a huge opportunity for publishers to regain some of that negotiation power, some of that control over your own data and your own assets that has been lost because of programmatic and because of third-party cookies over the past 10 years. So lean in. Now is the time.
Sorry.
All right. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I want to add one more, because we were talking about privacy and consumers, and as Matthew was talking, I had to think about the consumer, right? So it's also an opportunity for, we keep saying value exchange. We love to talk about value exchange, and it's been, I would say, weak. We ended up in this mess because of all the data that was being collected, and there wasn't transparency, and consumers were a bit bamboozled, and why am I seeing this? And so I really think this is also the time, let's not wait till the third-party cookie goes away and say, okay, now I'm going to build value exchange. It doesn't work like that. So this is the moment for publishers, again, to be really thoughtful and intentful in terms of what do I want to say to my audience, right, to my readers, and how can I start to build a relationship that is kind of renewed.
That's terrific. Before we go on, I want to just, if you've joined us late, I want to just reintroduce the panel. I'm John Dioso, editor of Studio 30. Today we're talking about future-proofing marketing, measurement, and cover opportunities. No, we're not. With me today, we're Joanna Catalano, Chief Growth Officer of Piano, Marie Fettner, Managing Director, Global Accounts Piano, and Mathieu Roche, co-founder and CEO of ID5. We're talking about, actually, something much more important than that. And before we get back, I want to shout out some of the people who are watching us today. It's Jose Luis from Dallas, Piyush from India, Guy or Guy from Toronto, sorry if I got that right, and Mohammed from Athens. All right, so sorry, bad script. All right, Joanna. This is for Marie. Joanna just mentioned GDPR in Europe, and she had earlier mentioned in a previous conversation that we don't even know whether Flock and the privacy sandbox will even pass muster in Europe, which happens to be such a huge market for Google. How do you see this playing out globally, given the different levels of privacy compliance in the US versus the EU and the rest of the world? And yeah, Marie, why don't you take that first?
Very good question. We know it has been tried and it has been tested in the States, and we've got some indicative results coming out, which seems quite positive using Flock. Here in Europe, with the permission-based marketing and privacy, GDPR regulations, etc. So it's Google had to essentially roll back on their plan to test it here in Europe. Positive signs are there are conversations happening between two parties, the regulators and Google. We don't yet know what's going to come out of that. And looking at different sides of the coin, we are looking at publishers who are open-minded. New York Times boldly stated that they would be happy to try Flock. Guardians, likes of Guardian, they said, no way, Jose, I'm not going to do that. We're not going to be part of that because we are not confident about the consent and permission, etc. And then you have a browser, smaller browsers, so small but important, like Mozilla, Firefox and Brave, up in arms that we're not going to definitely participate or come up with these kind of ideas because it goes against the it's similar to actually third-party cookies if you look at it, and even WordPress, although I don't think they made a final decision, but WordPress was initially considering blocking a Flock as well. So browsers blocking, that's one thing, but if content management platforms start blocking that, then it's going to create even much bigger obstacles for Flock as well. So here in Europe, it's split and divided, and we'll have to see what how the conversations go. But there are publishers in Europe who are open to try that. And as you say, for Google, just foregoing Europe is not an option. If you look at their revenue stream, more than 30% of their revenue is coming from Europe. So they will have to find a way, and they are having conversations with regulators. And I said earlier, sort of positive results already coming out of Flock. So if you look at, I think what Google stated a few weeks ago, they are looking at maybe even 350% uplift in product or brand recall. What's phenomenal. But what is missing in there is actually there's no, in a way, comparison between the Flock model and the third-party cookie model. So we don't know whether that's actually better or worse than the third-party cookie option. But I think overall, I personally feel that, yes, Flock comes with, it's not clear, the legality of it, and all of that, we need to look at it. But from publisher perspective, there are many options. That's a good thing. I think we need to be open-minded, trying different things. We have seen, I think Joanna briefly mentioned, for example, even far afield in Asia, South China Morning Post is doing really well with their first-party data strategy, and they are scaling up in across Asia as well. So there are success stories coming out using different methods, and not all the publishers will have that manpower investment and the people to be able to do that, and money budget to do that, but in different ways. I think we should try different ways, because otherwise certainly you don't want to be the last one standing when the music stops, and that's a scary thing.
Mathieu, I know that considering what Marie just said, GDPR in the EU led the way with privacy. CCPA copied them, and a lot of the United States individual state privacy regulations are modeling themselves on that. So if Google's privacy sandbox doesn't pass muster in the EU, is this all much ado about nothing?
Well, I mean, you've got to call it what it is, right? Privacy sandbox is by Google for Google. It's right. It's a Google. It's not an industry initiative. It's not supported in the W3C by any browsers. It certainly doesn't work for consumers, because you're effectively giving them zero transparency on how the data is processed, and giving them zero control on what it is, how it is used afterwards, because it's not personal anymore. By the magics of algorithm, they're not protected in the use of that data. So certainly not a solution for consumers, certainly not a solution for publishers and brands. They're getting, aggregated data to work with. How do you differentiate yourself if you work with the same data set as your competitors? How do you maintain performance if you work with aggregated data versus kind of granular data? So maybe it works for Google, but that's about it. And I think even from a privacy standpoint, as I said, right, it certainly doesn't work for consumers. And I think the fact that they haven't started testing in the EU is kind of a clear testament to the poor level of privacy compliance they're able to reach with this fuzzy notion of processing on the device and then sharing of aggregated data. I mean, it is personal data. It is processed by someone, whether it's Chrome or Google directly, so. Yeah, it's not because it's called Privacy Sandbox that it's privacy compliant.
All right, we just have a little bit of time left. Oh, go ahead, Joanna. You can weigh in first, and then we can do the last question.
I was going to say, we're talking about building audiences, right? I mean, building a cohort is only one way of doing that. It's only one strategy, and it's not comprehensive. So whether it's Google or not Google, using cohorts. Could it be useful? Yes, absolutely, in terms of building audiences and getting your segments right. But it's not the only thing you should be doing.
Great. And in the time we have left, I would just like to open it up to the three of you. And if there were one piece of advice, and I think that Mathieu already offered a little bit of it when he said lean in. But if there's one piece of advice that you would want publishers to take away from this conversation, what would it be? Let's start with Marie.
Three C's, I will say. Consent is very important. I think there are three in our marriage. I think, as Princess Diana famously said, I think we shouldn't always just look at regulators, GDPR, CCPA, and then we have the browsers, coming up with their own ideas and blocking, etc. There is always consumer. We need to make sure that we are doing the right thing and obtaining the consent, and that opens up all the doors. So that's my first C. Second is content. We have publishers with extremely high quality journalism, and we should be able to monetize on that. We should be able to bravely ask. I mean, we've seen so many publishers who are afraid even to launch and ask to pay for quality journalism. I think it's important that we know that and we are able to monetize on that, and hyper personalization based on that content. Once you have the permission, you will be able to hyper personalize. The last C is collaboration, which is not an easy thing, but I think we need to all work together, whether that's based on ID resolution, or it can be universal ID, or it can be consortium that is cropping up here in France, the UK, and Norway, etc. Some succeeded, some haven't, but I think that collaboration to create that scaling up is very important for us all to survive.
Mathieu, what about you?
Yeah, I think now is the time, right? I think publishers shouldn't wait. They have a lot to gain in being at the forefront of this transition that we're going through as an industry. There's already a third of their traffic that's invisible, right? That doesn't support cookies. A third of their web traffic, right? And a growing portion of their mobile app traffic. So now is the time, because they can learn from this invisible traffic and build for a future when all traffic will be invisible to cookies, and so really kind of understanding what's happening now is important to be ready for what will happen tomorrow. And already the infrastructure is in place. There's over 60,000 publishers that are using ID5 IDs and passing ID5 IDs. There are technology solutions like Piano who are enabling kind of publishers to use ID5 IDs to build cookieless audiences, SSPs, DSPs, ad servers, tracking solutions. So it's available, right? And it needs to be used so that people can learn and prepare for the world that's coming next. And the world will look like what they want it to look like, right? If they let others decide for them, publishers won't get the better half of the bargain. So they need to lean in, they need to participate, they need to help shape this industry that is core to their business model.
Right. Joanna, take us home in 30 seconds.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's not that much more I can add, right? I mean, you heard kind of from the pros, but again, it's rare that we have so many options. So I would just say, fear not. Don't go into this with fear. There's so much, there is information. People are having this discussion. Take advantage of the availability of options. Take advantage of the fact that there's information widely available, and be empowered by it, and be creative with it.
Great. All right. I want to thank Piano Chief Growth Officer Joanna Catalano, Piano Managing Director Global Accounts Marie Fenner, and ID5 co-founder and CEO Mathieu Roche for joining me for a great conversation about how the right data can build brand value and protect consumer privacy. Thanks for a great conversation. Of course, special thank you to everybody out there for watching us. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.